Okay? And you can go really far crazy with this, and I bless you to do so. I bless you to try to outstrip me. Let's go. Let's race. Let's make a race out of it. James, this is one passage I do want to exegete for you this morning. Turn to James chapter 1. Somebody move James in my Bible here this morning. Okay. James chapter 1.
It's on page 897.
You have very small Bible. Yeah, New Testament. That's funny. Okay, James 1:5. Familiar verses. Okay, very familiar. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men generously and without reproach, and it will be given him. So far, so good. Woohoo! That's a good scripture memory verse. That's one you've memorized. Okay, next verse. But let him ask in faith without any doubting. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Now, how many of you have ever read those verses and been a little taken aback? It's like, wait a minute, it starts out so friendly. Oh, you need wisdom? Just ask God. He's going to just give it to you. King James, and upbraideth not, He's going to give it to you generously. But then it turns. What? Right? If you get it, you better believe you're getting it, because you don't, you're a double-minded, you're good for nothing. It's like, what? Wait a minute. Let me propose to you that passage of Scripture makes absolutely no sense unless you understand this. What is unstated but implied in this passage is that if you lack wisdom, God is going to give it to you. Now, all cessationist evangelicals would go, check. I believe that part. But then if they check it in their God don't talk no more theology, the next 3 verses don't make a lick of sense. God just suddenly gets very mean. So I propose that God gives you wisdom check is not, no. Let me back up. This says, if any of you lacks wisdom, God's going to speak to you. He's going to give you a word. He's going to talk to you. Now, if anybody talks but doubts, well, he's just never going to get anywhere. That person is unstable, you're just not going to get it. Because you're asking God, speak to me, speak to me, speak to me. He speaks to you, and then you go, no. Do you see? Now that passage makes sense. God just doesn't infuse some kind of amorphous wisdom into your heart. God, give me wisdom. Okay. No. It says, God, give me wisdom, so the Lord speaks a word to you. But you and I, and especially those of us who are still recovering from the ravages of anti-supernatural modernism, we doubt that we just received a word from the Lord. Oh, I don't know if that's, I have a hard time hearing from God. Ad nauseum. Got it? Well, that person is completely unstable. That's what this verse says, and I believe that's true. Completely, because God's going, what can I do? I played the flute, you wouldn't dance, and I played a dirge, and you wouldn't cry. You're hopeless. I can't do anything with you. Now, God doesn't spew out his mouth. You're not hopeless to God. But as far as gaining wisdom, it's hopeless. Because you asked for wisdom, God gave it, and you closed your ears and said, I can't hear anything. Okay? I'm just hitting on a few high spots this morning because we have such a short time, but let me hit on just a few. The most obvious objection to this doctrine of God still talks is, how do I know I'm right? The other theological problem is, well, what if are you saying that when God speaks, it has the authority of Scripture? On one hand, that's so dumb, I don't want to address it, but on the other hand, okay, we'll address that, but not right now. It's too dumb to address right now. The answer is no. But the most obvious question is, well, how do I know it's God? And I'm going to give you the answer to that question. Okay? You'll know it's God because of the fruit it produces in your life. Okay? There is a danger when you enter. Now, let me back up. I think of Barbara Streisand. Life was oh so simple then. Or it's time to rewritten that line. Back when I was a closed-door cessationist and God didn't talk, life was simple. Because if I thought I heard a word from the Lord, it was either the devil or me. Because the only thing, just read it. If it's not in the Bible, don't swallow it, don't believe it, don't receive it, anything. So life was simple. Heretics were few and far between, at least I thought. Okay? But once you open the door to God talking, all of a sudden you've opened the door to a whole mess of messes. Okay? I've already said, if you don't hear the word of the Lord, you're dead in the water. Hearing the word of the Lord is my life. Bless you, Bill. Thanks for serving us every Sunday morning. I'm going up there and greeting folks. Bless you. I believe that it's when you enter the world of God speaking, you enter a world where you need discernment. But guess what? It's totally worth the price. It's completely worth the risk. Because if you think you hear from the Lord speaking, guess what? Sometimes you're going to be wrong. And of course, if you ever get it wrong, then God is really mad at you. And he drop kicks you through, that's the end. You're out of here. Your goalpost of life. Wrong. If you believe God still speaks and you speak a word for somebody else, sometimes you're going to be wrong. Okay? So when you enter this whole realm of God speaks, all of a sudden now you're required to have discernment. But I want to make the discernment fairly simple right off the bat. And that is, if the Lord speaks to you and it leaves you feeling negative about yourself or somebody else, it wasn't the Lord. Or if the Lord gives you a word and it leaves somebody else feeling negative about themselves or you, it probably wasn't the Lord. So and again, we'll go into this probably in weeks to come, because some of you would say, well, what about the Old Testament prophets? Yeah. We're in the New Covenant. The New Covenant prophecy is radically different from Old Covenant prophecy. There's a surprise. Okay? And 1 Corinthians chapter 14 says, you can all prophesy so that you can all be built up and encouraged. That's the essence of prophecy in the New Covenant, is built up and encouraged. So if you wonder if the word that you got was from the Lord or not, just look at yourself. Did it leave you bad, grumpy, worried, stressed, messed up, discouraged? Then it wasn't. Did it build you up? It was. Yes.
Talking about fruit and talking about the power of the word from the Lord. All that Andrew Womack told me was, he says, I have a word for you